like a father who's very well-to-do. He doesn't reveal the secrets to all of his offspring because they may not be capable of managing such a big operation. But if he sees that he has some qualified offspring, then he brings and reveals to them so that they can manage it nicely. That's the idea. Why? Because as Sanatana Goswami said, that the transcendental names and forms of the Lord pastimes they're sweet, but just like milk when it's touched by the lips of the serpent, it has poisonous effects. Similarly, Vaishnava Girnam Putam Harikatamitam Shravanam Navakartavyam Sarpochistaham Tapa. Similarly, pastimes of the Lord, when they touched the non-devotees, become poisonous. So we shouldn't hear from them. Because whatever benefits can come from pastimes of the Lord, also the opposite can come, poison, because people like it. But now we see that the world is becoming very atheistic. Practically no faith in God as a person left. So they say that there's no more miracles, there's no belief in miracles, because a miracle is done by act of God, and because everything is explained by scientific, mechanistic principles, there's no need for God, and therefore there's no possibility of any miracles. Everything they say can be explained by physics and biochemistry, things like that. So it's that's blasphemy. To blaspheme the Lord's activities and say that they're just concocted, they're just mythology. In court, if someone goes into court and testifies against a great personality and says he never really did anything, he didn't write those books that he wrote, and so many things, he never did any of those great things. What is your evidence? And the man says, I have no evidence, but that's my feeling. This is the atheists feel that there could not be such a person to perform such, who could create universe, who could give life to seeds. So not possible. So better you don't give it to them. That's the idea. And that's why it's also offensive to explain the glories of the Lord to the envious. One of the 10 offenses one should avoid. Because if he does, they'll just become offensive and they'll harm themselves and others also. Because they'll say things or do things that are offensive to the Lord, which is a great misfortune if someone does that. Krishna explains it. Those who are envious, they're placed by the Lord in lower and lower species. So there's 8,400,000 species. There's upper and middle and lower planetary systems. One can live in these places that are not very desirable. So, and the devotees can understand because the Lord reveals himself. As quoted here in this verse, Naham Prakasha Sarvasya, Yogamaya Smavati, Puro Yam Navijanati Loko Mama Jamandi. Which says, I'm never revealed to the foolish and intelligent. For them, I'm always covered by my creative pose, eternal pose, Yogamaya. So the deluded world knows me not. Can't know it. So it's a great privilege to be able to understand what the Lord is doing, why he's doing it. And it applies to things like creation of the universe, maintenance of the universe, as well as his intimate pastimes. But the Bhagavatam begins with explaining about his Shrishti, his creation first. Because that's something that perhaps non-devotees can appreciate a little. Because it's very interesting and they don't know how the universe is and how life comes about. They don't know, so they might be interested. And we see then different scriptures, they all say that God created. We say any of the bona fide scriptures, they may be simplified, but they admit that God created everything. They don't know all the details. And it's true that one doesn't have to know all the details. And it doesn't mean that a person is not very intellectual, but you should be able to understand certain things. God is the original source of everything. He's the maintainer. He's the supplier. Nityanam, Chaitanya Chaitanyanam, Eko Bahalam, Yogas Datikaman. He's maintaining all the living entities. And just by chanting Hare Krishna, one can get sufficient realization and appreciation for the Lord that will make him qualified to be favorable to the service of the Lord, and thus one can go back to Godhead. Doesn't have to be a great scholar. It just has to be devotional. And that devotion is natural for all the souls. If one is in good association and hears from the proper sources, then the dirty thoughts, dirty mentality that one has goes away, and he's restored to his original pure state. Souls are all originally pure, but they can become covered by association with the lower modes of nature. So now someone may say, why then are you distributing Bhagavatam to people that may be envious? They're given a chance, and the devotees of the Lord are very merciful. Even though it's true there may be some envious persons that are receiving these books, and they may react in unfortunate way. But that chance is taken. Of course, the devotees who are distributing books, if they can ascertain if the person appears to be grossly envious, then the Vaishnavas recommend that such persons be avoided. Prema Maitri Gopeksha Ishvara Tadiyana Balisheshu and the envious. The envious should be ignored, whereas the foolish, they can be given mercy, kripa, by a Vaishnava, by a second-class Vaishnava. And then the devotees of the Lord, they should be made friendships, Maitri. Devoting the second-class category, he should make friends with other devotees. And the Lord, he should worship with love. So that way, one can avoid making offenses.
Yeah. Any thoughts? Yes.
Just a question. We were talking about that chanting Hare Krishna is the best way to get this realization. I can't remember what, but I think it's that Krishna is God. But my question is, so why is it that we are reserved to the fact that chanting Hare Krishna is all that we need? Because personally, I need to be convinced that Krishna is God with philosophy. But there are people like Gorkishore Das Babaji who had no education. So why is it that they have a lot of faith and most of us need to be convinced with philosophy?
Maharaj, would you like to answer? Well, first of all, Gorkishore Das Babaji was not educated. That's unfair to say. He couldn't read in the sense, of reading a book of what we consider education, but he had perfect knowledge, because the conclusion of all education and knowledge should result in rendering devotional service to the Supreme Lord. Therefore, whatever material knowledge anybody has is useless if it's not engaged into absolute truth. So we have to understand what true knowledge is. He was supremely educated. So, it's offensive to say he was uneducated. So, just a little distinction. But yeah, we need to be sufficiently convinced. Said that Krishna consciousness is difficult for those who are complex. It's very simple for those who are simple, straightforward. So in this age of Kali Yuga, we have so much contaminations within our heart, so much impurities. So we have to hear constantly to convince us that what we're doing is the greatest thing. Before we come to association with the devotees, usually there's some suffering, some anxiety, some hopelessness in life. So we take up to the path of chanting Hare Krishna, and it's new, it's exciting, it's fun. But then over a long period of time, we're doing the same thing every day. Struggle, challenge, why am I doing this? It's not fun, it's tough. So we have to hear, we have to be sufficiently convinced that what we're doing is proper. And when we're chanting Hare Krishna, we're associating directly with Krishna. By that direct association with Krishna, then Krishna will manifest in our life, and these impurities, these anarthas will be removed. But we have to chant free from offenses. Because if we go on chanting with offenses, we could go on chanting for lifetimes and still not attain the desired goal. So we hear from the scriptures, they convince us to take up this path, and we also hear Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Namaiva Kevalam Kalana Steva Nasteva Nasteva Gichanyata. In this age of Kali, there's no other way than chanting the holy names. So it's a very easy process, relatively speaking. To control our mind, our senses. It's very difficult. But simply just engaging our senses in the service of Krishna, and especially chanting the holy names, all good will come from that. So I hope that answers your question sufficiently. Does anybody have anything else? Yes, Bhakti Aiden.
Saw the word asuric used, like asuric don't have, kind of like said don't approach with an asuric spirit. What does that mean?
Asuric means somebody of a demonic nature. Asura. Sura means like demigod, or somebody who's faithful to the Lord. Asura means somebody who's rebellious of the Lord. So in the purport, Prabhupada's talking about this because the word was used in the shloka. What's up there? Pashunam. Pashunam says of the beasts. So then Prabhupada parallels these asuras to beasts, because a beast can't understand anything. One time, the devotees were in Vrindavan, and Prabhupada was lecturing on the Bhagavatam, and there was these pigeons that come in. I don't know why, but they always come in the temple. They're always there. They're flying around, and sometimes they like pass stool on the devotees sitting there. It's inconvenient. But the devotees told Prabhupada, oh, you know, at least they're coming to hear Bhagavatam. They're making advancement. Prabhupada was like, no, they're just having sex. So beasts you can speak to, you can sit and tell a cat the whole philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, but it will never understand it. So it's just a mental disturbance in this way. So Prabhupada was connecting these beastly-like nature to the asuras, people who are envious of God, who are not inclined to pursue spiritual life. Because then one can analyze what is one doing. One's activities and energy, thoughts are simply based around sleeping, eating, mating, defending. It's really an animalistic platform. But the human, we have this ability to reason, to wonder, to question. We have a faculty of higher consciousness, so we question, what is the point of life? Why am I suffering? What's the origin of life? So we have to utilize this propensity, and in tandem with hearing from the proper authorities, questioning and serving, hearing the proper authorities, then we can hear transcendental knowledge and be convinced that we should chant Hare Krishna. But it's a nice portion of this Srimad Bhagavatam, because talking about hearing from proper sources. So we're hearing this chapter where Vidura meets Uddhava, and Uddhava's getting ready to leave the world also after the disappearance of Lord Krishna, and he tells Vidura to go approach Maitreya. And he describes how Maitreya was instructed by the Lord himself and he has sufficient knowledge to help you attain the highest state of love of God. So in the next chapter, chapter 5, begins Vidura's talks with Maitreya, and he begins inquiring into all facets of life and their discussion. It's very nice. It's, you could say, a first really like long saga of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Occasionally there's different events that take chapters and chapters. So I believe their conversation goes from chapter 5 all the way to like chapter 30, 33, describing the appearance of Lord Kapiladev and his enlightening of his mother Devahuti. So they talk about everything from the nature of the Supreme Lord, the creation, how he creates, how he has how he creates the material energy, how it's unmanifested, how it becomes manifested, Lord Brahma and the demigod's role in that creation, time. There's one whole chapter that describes all about the nature of time, the measurement of time, what time is. And yeah, just like that. So we're very fortunate to hear from such an authoritative scripture as the Srimad Bhagavatam, because just by hearing every day, it has such a profound impact on our consciousness. Where if we're living like a beast, like an animal, we're just not even aware how the things we see, feel, smell, hear, how they affect our consciousness. But to become Krishna conscious, first we have to become conscious. We have to become aware. So we can become aware of how it is when I'm hearing the Bhagavatam, I'm meditating on these transcendental points versus, I walk down the road or somewhere and I see something not so favorable for Krishna consciousness, and it creates something to meditate on. And how do we meditate on that? Do we see it in relation to Krishna, or do we see it in a way of enjoyment? If we're seeing something in a way of enjoyment, then we're bound to duality. There's hankering and lamentation. There's enjoyment and suffering. So it will never be peaceful. But when we see everything in relation to Krishna, we can learn to not attach to my mind, my senses. I'm not my senses, I'm not my mind. They're just faculties for moving this machine around through this material world. So the more we can take a step back and see that and shift our consciousness in the right direction where it needs to go, seeing everything in relation to Krishna, then everything becomes crystal clear. We have a resolute purpose that I'm focused on the spiritual domain. When I do that, I become joyful. I'm not bothered by the things that affect me in life. So we always have to stay on that straight and narrow, that path. So thank you for your question. I kind of spun off there a little bit at the end, but anything else anybody would like to bring up or mention? Yes.
Hare Krishna. It's not necessarily related, but it's a question concerning the acharyas and the general mood that they carry of humble, submissive service. So to first acknowledge that this attitude they have of, being the most fallen, this is something they very mercifully give to us to show us how we should approach devotional service. But what I can gather is that these are actually like the most exalted souls. And yeah, are worthy to be followed to the very end of the line. So that's there. But in terms of us not wanting to just imitate this mood of being the most fallen, most contaminated. But actually feeling this, I'm struggling to understand how this isn't just, seems to be just romanticizing one's relationship with Maya and the contamination that they've fallen under. It seems to like almost be holding on to and dramatizing this relationship that we've had with the material world, where we've just been transmigrating from body to body. So how does this mood, actually having this mood of being, the most fallen, the most unworthy of Krishna's, how does this actually bring us closer to Krishna?
If we try to mimic the mood of the acharyas, then very much so we'll be subject to dramatizing, the situation that we're in. One time, a devotee was talking to Srila Prabhupada. Might have been Satsvarup Maharaj, I'm not exactly sure, but he said, Prabhupada, I'm the most fallen. Prabhupada said, no, you're not the most anything. So, okay, if my position is a fallen position, then I'm going to be the most fallen. We're doing it from an egotistical perspective, which is fake, which ultimately will lead to fall down because it's not based on real humility. So humility is not seeing oneself to be low necessarily. It's to see others being greater than oneself, i.e. Krishna. So as one approaches Krishna, who's supremely perfect in every possible way, who's infinite and all expansive, he has all opulence, has all knowledge, all power, he has everything and more. The more that you approach and realize that, then you realize how insignificant you actually are. So rather than trying to realize how insignificant I am, naturally by realizing how significant the Lord is, then naturally you realize, what do I have? I have nothing. I'm just a little tiny speck of dust at the Lord's lotus feet, and that's a overstatement. Lord Chaitanya, I prayed like this. Please, just I don't know how I've fallen in the material world, but please just make me one of the atoms at your lotus feet. So this is Krishna coming to play the part of a devotee to show us how to act, and he's saying that. He's not saying I'm great, I'm good at chanting, I got my mind under control. No, just make me a little speck of dust at his feet. So we should always respect the mood of the acharyas and follow in their footsteps, but we can't mimic them. We have to act from where we're at. So just by engaging ourselves in Krishna's service, then all these false designations of the material world will be removed, will be purified. And then as we become purified, naturally you realize the Lord's greatness. So then when you realize the Lord's greatness, like I said, you see your insignificant role in his creation, but it's not like a depressing, sad, lamenting way. It's actually a source of ecstasy, where somebody who studies psychology in the modern world, they could read some of the works of the acharyas and they're like, oh, they have like inferiority complex, they're like depressed, but it's missing the proper understanding. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that if we try to enter into that mood prematurely, like really, really try so hard, then yeah, we're subject to that inferiority complex or depression or low self-esteem. But as we just naturally serve Krishna and use whatever we have in Krishna's service, then Krishna being pleased with us, will reveal more of himself to us. But we have to be humble for that.
I can tell a little story that happened to me. Before I was a devotee, I had a roommate. We were in college, and we got into some discussions. And one time we discussed which of the two of us was more humble. And, we went on for a long time trying to analyze. And I said, I think you're more humble than me because I'm very, I like to be praised, and you never. And he said, yeah, I agree with you. So when he agreed with me, then I thought, well, maybe you're not so humble after all. Why would you think you're more humble than me? And this way, we went on back and forth, couldn't get anywhere because neither one of us had any idea about God or greatness. So we were just kind of bubbling around.
Yeah, humility is something that you can't really fake. You could fake it for so long and then it will come out and see that, the humility is not actually there. There's some ulterior motive. Only by putting Krishna in the center and using everything in Krishna's service, glorifying Krishna, putting Krishna there, then one can be seemingly filled with charisma and energy and doing so much activities and becoming praised, but they could be the most humble. Whereas somebody who could be living on a street as a pauper with nothing, filled with pride, filled with envy, and not actually humble. So this is what the scriptures say, one can never understand the mind of a pure devotee. Okay, thank you for hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Gauranatai ki jai, Vanchakapatarubhyascha kripa sindhi vichapachita nam pavani vivaishnavibhyo namo namah.